So, okay, well, I wrote these notes yesterday. Hopefully, I can still understand what's happening and we can do okay. But I thought what Ian spoke about on Sunday, although he was feeling like really ill, you can clearly tell it was like, "You're doing so well." Was really good. So I thought it just seemed, since I kind of was told last minute that I would be leading, it made sense just to kind of like talk about it a little bit more, because I think it's something that is important. So there's just kind of three sort of ways that I thought we could kind of like break down rather than just talking about labels in general. The first one, which Ian kind of spoke of, and when you're thinking about somebody like Doubting Thomas or something like that, is kind of labels which relate to like past mistakes or like weaknesses you have. So I think that's one we'll talk about. But I thought other sort of labels that we can have we cannot only be labeled for our mistakes and the things we do wrong, but we can also be labeled because of past successes and talents we have and certain expectations which come with that. And then another way I thought is that we can also be labeled because of like the role we play or the job we have is another way which we can be labeled. So really I just thought I'd spend some time kind of unpacking these a little bit and just looking at how we can sort of tear off these labels and just remember the main one, the only one that matters, is that we are children of God. That's the only label that really matters. It's the only one that we should have like stuck to us at all times. The rest don't really matter. They don't define who we are, although we may be involved with these things and it may be good things and it may be things we're working on, but they're all temporary. Whereas being a child of God is something which, if we want it, God is always offering it to us. If we accept it, it is a label which is always permanent and is always the best label you can have. So yeah, that's kind of what we're going to look at. So I'll probably only speak for maybe like 10, 15 minutes or something, but we can then just kind of just talk a little bit after. And it's all good because, Charles, you are a wonderful man if you're listening to this, but there's always so much depth in what he has to say that sometimes it is difficult when he speaks for 45 minutes, an hour, to take it all in. So hopefully this will be a bit more lighter, not as much wisdom in here probably, but hopefully it should be all right. So first to look at labels. So you're not defined by your past mistakes or your weaknesses, which is often the most common label, I think, that we have, and it's kind of, we're labeled for the things we don't have, the things which we haven't been given, we haven't got the skills we don't have, what we aren't good at, and kind of what's wrong with us. That's kind of like how these labels kind of arise. And I think a lot of these are things which start from school. I think kind of that's where this process kind of really starts. And I think that although you can look at them in that sort of beginning context, I think they continue all the way up to adulthood, and they just kind of continue still in their sort of simplistic state. I think it just kind of continues on, but some like examples I thought of that maybe some of us have experienced, maybe are experiencing or have at some point, is that maybe having the label of that you're weak or you're silly or you're dumb or you're unpopular or that you're boring or that you're unattractive, that you're annoying, that you're a burden on the people around you, or that you're a chore. I think these are all things that, even if you haven't experienced them yourself, you've seen around you, that there have been maybe people you've seen that maybe had that label on them. Maybe you've been involved in that process, because I think it's often easy to kind of view other people in a certain way, and even though you're not doing it consciously, it's still happening. You still kind of, if you meet someone or you know of someone, you still put certain labels on them and make certain assumptions based on a conversation you've had or a bit of information you've heard about them, and that all kind of shapes how you kind of view a person, which I'm always like, when like, it's difficult in church because people, since there is so much closeness, there is a lot of talking with other people, talking about their issues and stuff, which is absolutely amazing. But sometimes there are points where I really feel I want to distance myself from that in a lot of ways, because if other people are having an issue, and as long as they've got people around them who are there and supporting them, I myself, as somebody who's maybe on the outside, I don't really want to know what's going on with them, just because I'm so conscious that it'll shape how I view them. And I'm sure that they don't necessarily want everyone to kind of know what's going on. So if it's my mom, who's always about focusing on making sure people are doing better and getting alongside them, which is amazing. But for me, as someone she's maybe wanting to share about it, there's often a disconnect where I don't want to know more because I don't want it to kind of shape how I view people. But yeah, so these are the kind of labels we can have, and they're based on kind of things we've maybe done wrong, or ways we've messed up, or weaknesses we've had. But it's just to always remember that I was just, as I've been reading the Bible in 1 year, which is kind of this like app you can get, there's, you read part of the New Testament, part of the Old Testament, and either like a psalm or a proverb a day. And through that, you get through the whole Bible. Doing it on my phone, it was so easy. The last time I did it, I tried to like take notes in like a book, but it's been so much easier. I've just been like screenshotting when there's been like something really good. So now I just have like an album of like 200 like photos for like January to April. So I was just flicking through that a bit, but it was just the first thing I had was like on Genesis 1, and they just Nicky Gamble does like a little like commentary on it. I mean, he's probably written it with his buddies, the curators, curates. Yeah, like Stephen Foster, Rob Wall, your buddies. But what he said in there is that just looking at creation, God said that everything He made, that He said it was good. He didn't make rubbish. He doesn't make rubbish. He approves of all that He created, which means He approves of you too. He may not approve of all that you do or all that you're doing, but He never stops approving of you, and you can't escape that love or being part of His family. That's something you can't get outside. It really is that like so wide. It's like if you're running around like the outside trying to look for a weak point where you can get out like the cutters and like cut through the wire fence. There isn't a way to do that, because God loves you so much, and He made you for a purpose and made you good, and that is a unchangeable fact, that relationship, and that you are good. You were made to be good. You were made. God approves of you. That's something which can't be changed, no matter what outside forces there are. I think for this one, it's so good just to look in the Bible and see how many like freaking screw ups there are who do so much. So just a few examples. Oh, it's so liberating. So Jacob is one. He tried to, he scammed his brother out of the birthright and out of the blessing, and then had to run away, which is pretty bad. Moses, leader of the Israelites out of Egypt, he killed a dude. Just flat out killed him.
Forget about that, didn't you? You did so much.
You're dead. Oh. Peter, who just after Jesus had been taken away, been told he was going to disown Jesus, and then he still went and disowned Jesus around the campfire when people were like, you were with him? No, I wasn't, I swear. Oh no, the cock crowed. Oh, I screwed up. Yeah, is that right?
Is it? Yeah.
Was it not? A crow. A crow crowed.
A cock crow?
No, it was a cock crow.
A cock crow.
Are we sure?
Yeah.
Can we get a fact check on that?
A cock crow. That's really tongue twisting.
It's right. It's definitely not a crow. Does it?
It's a cock crow. It's a cock crow. It's a cock crow.
Okay.
You're right.
That's good. Okay,
that's
good.
what they do. Yeah. Cock crow.
Okay.
Cool.
Actually, I just makes me think of Arrested Development. Them all doing like the chicken dance, and how they all have their like different one.
Oh yeah.
Okay. See, that's when we'd have the Mr. F drop. Okay, cool. So got a bit sidetracked there. But Thomas, as we looked on Sunday, doubted the resurrection. King David, who committed adultery,
and killed the dude who.
And then Uzziah.
Uriah.
Uriah. Uzziah, it was a king? Or,
Sure.
Yeah?
There was a lot of
He's the king at the time of Isaiah?
Isaiah. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
It rhymes, so
Okay.
makes sense.
And then the big one, obviously, that I think of is Paul, who obviously wrote like 16 books in the Bible or whatever it is, who was responsible for the killing of thousands of Christians to start with, and then became one of the most influential Christians ever. So that's just for all those people who are so important to the history of the history of Christianity and the history in the Bible and the coming of Jesus, and then his ministry afterwards. All these people made huge mistakes. They all had these labels on them, but they were able to tear them off and work through them and not let them define who they are. So that's the first thing. You're not defined by your past mistakes and your weaknesses. Mm. They're not what defines you. So the next thing I thought to talk about was, although you can be defined by your mistakes, I also think you can be defined by your past successes, which is something which it maybe isn't as intuitive, because you think successes, they're obviously good things, or obviously ways that you've excelled in the past. But with them, they can carry a certain weight, a certain expectation of that. You succeeded to a certain degree in the past, so therefore you should succeed in a certain degree in the future. Maybe it's, again, the examples I think of are something at school, like if you absolutely rocked it academically and got all your ones, all your aces, you maybe got were able to go to special things because you were really smart, or something like that, then the expectation was that you would then carry that on into university, continue, do a degree which has a sort of weight to it, maybe a lawyer or a doctor or something greater than that. But not that you do that, but that you would also continue that at the absolutely highest level. You would then go on to do further education after that in the highest level. You would go into the highest job at the highest level. You would continue it on, and then you would come back to school in 30 years' time and tell them about how your school was great and how you're the perfect student and how you're still doing amazing. So I think there is that sort of, and so it kind of creates a fear of failure when you're kind of in this process where you've had this success. There is this mentality that you've got to keep it up. You've got to strive. And it's not a case of where that first success was there was no playing field. So it was just you, and you had this thing and you did it awesome. You did it great. The next thing, it's not a case of you just trying to do the best you can. It's just there's a mark you have to meet. You have to meet that mark or exceed that mark. Otherwise, that will be viewed as a failure for yourself. So, I think there are some problems with successes as well. And forgive me for my Americanizations of this, but a thing, especially I'm thinking of this week, is in American sports they have this thing called the draft. So they have all the colleges. They've got the colleges who do all the sports, and then they've got the professional organizations. So in American football, you've got Alabama and Ohio State and all these schools who make these great athletes. And then for the professional teams, once a year they take turns picking people from each of these schools. They pick the best ones. And so you have a first round, a second round, a third round. So the best players are going to be picked with the first round. And the thing that always comes with that is that there's a stigma. If you're picked as the first player from out of all of the colleges, out of all of America, out of all of the 21 to 23-year-olds who are eligible, the first person they picked is you. You're the best out of all these people. You're going to come to our team. They do it so that the worst teams pick first. So the first team that picks has had a rubbish season, and they're saying to this person, you're going to turn it around, and because of you, we're going to win a bunch of games, get in the playoffs, hopefully win the Super Bowl, hopefully win the Stanley Cup or whatever sport it is. And so there is such expectation with that because of the past successes they've had, and there's countless examples of people who've thrived on that expectation, and countless others who've been that number one or that number two pick and they've absolutely crumbled. And just it's so difficult when you've had such success, and then that expectation, that label of that, if you don't reach that high standard, that label of failure. Once you kind of had it in the past and now it's gone. You kind of had this opportunity, but you've failed at it. And when you're in sort of like a process of looking for like the next step after that success, whatever it is, maybe you've had success going for a while, you've been doing good, but you're kind of at like a waiting point or a change-up point where you're going to go into something else. There can be so much time devoted to worrying about how are you going to continue your momentum? How are you going to continue to exceed those expectations, to kind of keep that label of I've been a success? You want to try and keep that on you and not kind of like lose it, and have it replaced by a negative one. So they spent all this time worrying, but again, the successes we have and the expectations that are put on us they're not what defines us. Just like our weaknesses, they don't make us any more a child of God. The success we have, we all have different talents, and so they're not the things, they're not the labels which matter intrinsically to who we are. They don't contribute more to love, they don't contribute more to blessing. Obviously the talents we have, we need to use them as much as we can, but success in certain areas, we're just called to do what God asks us to do, and then trust that He's going to use that the best, in the way that's best for Him, because He knows best. So I feel we need to try and stop worrying too much about whether or not people on the outside are going to view I guess the case is for me that I did well at school, done well at university. What am I going to do next? I myself probably put the expectation that the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to absolutely smash it, and people are going to be like, look at Rory, he's so awesome, isn't that great? Which is the pride in me. But so at this point, it doesn't make sense for me to worry. It doesn't make sense for me to try and focus too much on trying to reach the next level, because that doesn't really matter. It's not my job to kind of make that a thing, because you can often try and feel like you need to manufacture the success yourself and work out of who you are, work out of what you can do yourself. It's kind of how Charles talks about, like, when you're just by yourself, then you're just putting yourself out there to like the law of averages and just how people do, and you might be successful, you might not. It just depends the way the world works. But when you partner with the Holy Spirit and with God and give up that control, then there's such a different level of success. Success is not measured on the same way as it is. And it's not the same path at all, because God's with you. He's going to elevate you and use you for His purpose. So we don't need to worry, as it says in Matthew 6:27 in the Beatitudes. Is that the right pronunciation? And in the Bible for 1 year, they quoted Corrie ten Boom, who she always has good chat. She doing like Alpha. There was one thing she said in the Alpha videos about like going through like a tunnel, and another thing about how she was forgiving someone for what they did in like the Holocaust and stuff. And she's so good. One thing she said was that worry does not empty tomorrow of its sorrow, but empties today of its strength. There's nothing you really gain. All it does is it makes today worse. It doesn't make tomorrow any better, whatever you're worrying about. And just I think I've said most of what I want to say there, but an encouragement I thought is that someone who really had high expectations, kind of where we're at in the Bible in 1 year. I say where we're at, like there's like a community of people all around the world. It's like we're together. But it's we've just started Joshua, so Moses has just died and given control to Joshua, and it feels like certainly at this point there is a lot of expectation on Joshua. He's kind of been the chosen child, like the appointed successor to Moses. So now he's going to have to lead these thousands upon thousands of Israelites. And it's not just leading them in the wilderness. He's leading them as a general to cross over the Jordan and then take all these lands and fight all these wars and defeat all these armies. And so I'm sure in himself, as I don't think he was that old, he certainly wasn't old when he started with Moses, so maybe he was a bit older, 40 years, maybe a bit older. But I'm sure he didn't feel that he was going to be able to do this by himself, but trusting in God and trusting in what he was doing, he was able to do amazing things, much more than I'm sure he could have imagined. It's crazy reading, again, the story of the walls of Jericho, where God told him to do the most ridiculous thing. There's these impregnable walls, which there's no way that anything that they had at the time could possibly break them. And the instruction was for 6 days to get all the people, sound some trumpets, and go around the walls singing and playing the trumpets and doing everything. Do that, I think it was once for the first 6 days, and on the 7th day, go around, do it 7 times, sound the horns and the trumpets one last time, and then the walls will fall down, which is such a ridiculous thing. And you just imagine how the people of Israel must have felt like doing that. It must have been like, it's all gone wrong. It's all a shambles. But it happened, and the walls fell down, and they took Jericho, all because Joshua was following God's purpose. The VeggieTales episode on that is particularly good, because they've got 2 of the broad beans on the wall who are like trolling the Israelites the whole time. It's amazing. And they've got the little asparagus is Joshua.
Yes, I remember.
And the big
that.
asparagus and like the butternut squash are like, oh, I think he's doing a bad job. It's really good. Also, the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego King Nebuchadnezzar episode is also an absolute.
It's a hit.
It's absolutely legit.
Good for you.
Cool. So just the last one. Don't have much to say in it, but it's that. So you're not defined by your past mistakes or your weaknesses. You're not defined by your past successes or the expectations that are put on you. And you're not defined by your job or the role that you're playing. And it's so easy to become so identified in what you do, and then take the kind of assumptions that come with that role. Whether it is, I don't know if there's certain assumptions made about a lawyer, some good, some probably negative, I imagine as well. If only speaking to Jamie Wilson. There's some. And then with a dentist, are there any? I don't know.
Scary. Bad one.
You said something about like, also the people, even when you're like outside of work context, you don't like seeing clients because they talk about, oh, I've got this like tooth thing going on. It's always you can't separate.
Sure.
People can't separate you from the dentist, or same with a doctor. It's like, as soon as you're the doctor, like, oh, doctor. And
problem about alcohol.
I do have that.
I'm just out for my friend. For just 1 second. But it's so easy to become so identified with what you do, and for that to be the label you have. Yeah. I just think of Suits. I still need to watch the second half of the season.
We need to
That's
get
just
back on
been happening.
Is the latest season out?
So
Season 6.
it's weird. TV shows have done a weird thing now where they'll do half the season, then have a break, and then do the rest of the season. So I've seen the first half of 6.
Is this on?
I think it's just on Dave or something.
We got it on iTunes.
Yeah, sure. So I think they've done the second half, and then I think the whole new season starts in like July or something. But if you think of like, there's that thing that Harvey is so totally identified with his job and with being a hotshot lawyer and being a winner, certainly at the start of the show. And it's just other shows.
Ross takes him over, does he? Ross takes him over or something.
Yeah, well, I think Mike kind of softens him a little bit. But I'm going to get diverted if we talk about Suits too much. But it's so easy to become identified with the role that you play, and to have that kind of label and carry that around and kind of be thinking about that in whatever you're doing and kind of be kind of promoting that. But again, you're not defined by the job you play. I'm not defined as much as I love being a worship leader. I'm not defined by that. I'm also not defined as being a university student, or don't know, whatever comes with that. I'm not defined by anything else. Still defined as being a child of God. I just some more people in the Bible. Matthew, who was one of the disciples, he had the label of a tax collector, which is a very bad label to have, because you're seen as a crook. You were stealing people's money, taking more than what was due to you. But still, he was able to take that label off, made the decision to follow Jesus, totally changed how he was, and allowed him to do great things and really be there as part of the early church. And I think, again, with the fishermen as well, they kind of had their certain role kind of seen as like gruff, seen as not going to have anything to do with some sort of, when you compare them to like the rabbis or the priests or people like very religious people, you couldn't see anyone who was on the other side of the spectrum. But they decided to put down their nets, follow Jesus, and kind of tear off that label as well. And so we can always redefine ourselves. We're always so much more than the role we have. And I talk about them all the time, but I think it's amazing people like Tim Hughes and people like Al Gordon who, as like a worship leader, sing so many of their songs, and kind of seen them and kind of had a certain role as, you are a worship leader, you write good songs, and you could probably just chill for that and continue in that role for forever. But now both of them have gone on, they've done the whatever you need to do to become reverends or rectors or get confirmation, something-mation, to become ordained.
Yes.
Ordained. They both become ordained, and now they both have their own churches in England, one in Birmingham and one in London. They've kind of torn off the label of being just a worship leader, okay, now we're going to have the worship band on, we're going to sing Here I Am to Worship, absolute tune, people are going to be saved, and then we're going to go have coffee afterwards. Now they're building their own ministry, which is them. They've totally taken on a new role. They've totally gone out. They've redefined themselves in such an amazing way, now going so much more than just that kind of outside perception that you have of somebody like that. So that's just the last thing. I hope that's kind of made sense, but just to say that we need to try and tear off these labels, or at least not hold them as tightly as we do, because there is comfort in having a label. There's comfort in kind of, for the past 5 years, there's been comfort in holding on to like a student label, because it means that for the next 5 years I'm kind of safe in this bubble where it's kind of, it's okay because I've got that label, it's fine. So it's a bit difficult to take some of them off, but the only one that really matters, the one that's on your heart, is that you are a child of God. That's the only one that matters. So you're not defined by any past mistakes or weaknesses that you made, or weaknesses you feel that you have. You're not defined by successes and the crazy expectations that might come from that, and you're not defined by the current role or job that you play. You're so much more than that. You're a child of God. So that's kind of all I wanted to say. I don't know if anyone has any points coming out of that.
That's awesome. Every word. So good. I've got things I could say. I feel like I'm processing something. Like, it's so good. I love what you were saying about, like, it's not just, because obviously Ian focused on the negative side of labels, but I love what you said about successes, and I think that was so huge for me, because I think it is, there's one thing when we deal with labels, you know, the bad labels of our past, but it is such a real thing of like that expectation of the pressure we put in ourselves, or even doing ministry at Bethel, like, you guys are born to change the world, and then you're like, you measure success on, well, how many people have I seen healed, or how many people have got saved, or your success in, I found my calling, am I in what I'm meant to do? And actually, what I realised as you were saying that, like, God, success is so different, how God defines success than the world defines success, because a lot of times I kept thinking about how many people's lives that their fruit was not fully shown till they were dead, or like, you know what I mean, the extent of, sometimes God does reveal stuff or impact when we see it, but sometimes we don't have to know the impact we're having on things. And I think that keeps us like, humble and like, okay, God, I need you. But actually I was realizing it is so true to have that, like, it's okay to have that sense of maybe a label that will motivate you and inspire you, or, a word, but actually it doesn't define you. And equally, you can't accomplish it without God. And I think for me personally, I've found that constant like battle between, God has called me for big things, but yet I can't like have that pressure on me. And actually, I'm well aware of my weakness, that I cannot do it without him. And equally, whatever it looks like. And I think, so there's a lot of things I felt like it was really everything you were saying, but I love that particularly because I think when we think of labels, we do think of the negative ones sometimes, but actually there can be good labels put on us, but we have to watch that they don't become a box that define us, or this pressure that we put on ourselves, and then we think, I'm failing, or I'm not achieving, or, you're measuring success of what you've accomplished, when really that's not what God's measuring from us. And I think sometimes he'll put us through seasons that things like we're not seeing our impact, and we're still having impact, but we're not seeing it for I think almost just to adjust us. Like, it's not about what you do, it's about who I say you are. And so I think that was a really big thing that you pointed on, and I know in my own life that I've got to watch that I just don't put the pressure, but still have that. We're going to change the world, guys. Like, we're going to we're called for big things, but not from this place of I got to make it happen. But so everything, I think it was really, really good talk. Honestly, I'm glad it's recorded because I think everyone needs to hear that good kind of follow on.
Yeah, I thought that was really good about the sort of the positive ones, and sort of almost the positive labels and the role labels, because I think quite often, I mean, certainly in my experience, I think it's often taken laying down the thing that you were doing previously to move into the new thing that you're being called on into. I think sometimes we think about, as you go through life and as you achieve more, it's meant to build on to what you're doing already. But I think actually more often than not, I've found it's more actually when you put something down, you've then got capacity to take something new up, the next thing that you're being kind of called into, rather than being kind of like, you're kind of trying to carry a whole bunch of boxes and trying to put someone else on top and trying to juggle all this stuff. I think it's very often kind of being when you kind of rip off an old thing, or you sort of, you hold it less tightly. I love the way you put that, kind of, you hold it a little bit less tightly. That's when you've actually got hand space or capacity to actually go move into something else, but yeah, I thought that was great. And I think, it's good having those things. It's nice getting the knowledge when you do something well, or when you're good at your job or your role or whatever. But I think it's always just having that perspective that more often than not, it's nothing that you've actually done as such. I think kind of, sort of, it's when we start taking that on and thinking, oh yes, I did do this. I did, even the smarts sort of thing, like, yeah, you maybe studied hard, but God gave you the brain and the capacity to actually make that stuff happen.
I still trust that he rewrote he rewrites my exams. Yeah. Like, once you see the van driving away and it's like, you're making some changes.
The angels are coming.
Yes!
But
refresh that page.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and even kind of
he's just like sitting on a stack of them. No.
What Rory meant to say was, and I think that's it. So I think, when, even those positive labels when we've got, they're great, you receive them, but I think straight away you kind of know where to put them and kind of say, God, that was you. I think, you lined up this job. You made this thing that I tried at a success. And I think, when you start bundling your identity in the success of that, I thought it was really good what you said about once you've hit a mark for one time round, the expectation is you hit it again and again, and that can apply to a whole bunch of stuff. Whether the sport analogy is a really good one. You had a great first season, but then you have your sophomore slump. The second season round, you fall off the charts, or you're a band and you put out a great first album. They're like, oh, how are they going to top their debut? And then you put out a rubbish second album, or it could be a performance at work. You were great in this bit, but the second year and you were terrible. So I think it's when that success or that thing becomes you start claiming it as your own. And I think that can start to distort it a little bit. Your relationship with that success, with that role, I think starts to become a wee bit unhealthy, and actually can be as damaging as maybe those labels that are keeping you locked in.
And I think it's difficult when it's kind of like, if you think of it as like, you're kind of like building like stones. Like, I kind of think like, do you know those like, they have that game at like Abernethy where it's kind of like you've got like the big piece like this. It's like different like discs. You've got a piece like this, then a piece like this, and it's kind of like, it's like a kid's game. But it's kind of like you're kind of like building up. So you kind of like
you can't put the big disc on top of the small disc.
Yeah. So you end up on one of
the activity challenges.
Yeah. So you end up on one of them. You have like a really big one, and then a slightly.
Yeah.
So it can kind of be like. So like in like school where you're like exams, you're laying the foundation, and it's kind of like then university's laying like the next piece on top of that, then you get the right job. And I think as you were saying, Grant, I think it become more difficult like the more pieces you stack, because it's kind of like you've built this kind of like structure that kind of is. Oops, sorry, I'm doing an Elsa. Kind of. But, yeah,
you've been labelled.
It's okay.
I'm not a fan.
So see, stuff like that has been deleted out of the past recordings but now everyone
But I love
will
that.
know
That makes it right. It's like the best.
sometimes Elsa burps.
But Elsa, you give people permission to be free, and I think
Freedom.
Anyway,
Burps are great.
I'm tangents.
Yeah.
Tangents.
Burps are great.
He did.
Rory's like, yeah, okay, let's go.
What was I saying?
But so you can kind of like, the more steps you build, the more it's like, look at this thing that I've created. Haven't I made such a wonderful thing? Look where I am. I'm 30 years old and I've got this far and I've done pretty well. And so it's difficult when it's kind of to distance yourself from this thing that you've kind of been building towards, especially if you're like a type of person who has a really big like career goal and drive, or has a big goal that you've kind of got to build up towards.
Yeah.
When you're part of the way there, it's very difficult to separate yourself from that and kind of have your identity and your label in just intrinsically who you are in Jesus. So it is difficult to kind of have that separation. But so another thing I thought of is that because like with the sports thing, when it's kind of like you've had like your initial success and then you've kind of like fallen away and you kind of have that sort of problem. It's like everyone loves a story of like somebody who's kind of like struggled to start with, but then kind of like from like nowhere they come, and it's just like whoa, they just
Underdog.
Yeah. So again, to use these sporting ones, and again to use American sporting ones because I have been taken over by the American sports instead of
American football. Or...
Yeah. So this is American football.
Tuning.
In American football, the quarterback is the most important position. They're the person who throws the ball. They throw it to the big, tall wide receivers or the really small, fast ones, and then they run for touchdowns. So they're really important. So a quarterback who played for my favorite team, the Arizona Cardinals, but called Kurt Warner. So when you come into the league, normally you're 21, 22 years old. You're in fighting shape. You're just been through college, you're gonna take the world by storm. But for Kurt Warner, he didn't get drafted. No team wanted him out of college. So he started working in like a meat packing store or like a grocery store, and then eventually he played some American football in Europe. But then eventually, when he was 28, so this is no one comes into the NFL at 28 and does well, but he came in. He just managed to just barely get on with the team into the season. In the season opener, their starting quarterback gets injured. He hurts his knee.
And he gets it.
So Kurt Warner comes on, and he plays with them the whole season. He wins the most valuable player award. They win the Super Bowl.
Wow. Because of this guy.
Yeah, so
this should be a movie.
Yeah.
About this guy.
It's a slightly more positive.
Slightly more positive, yes.
So he did that. Then he had a bit of a slump, but then he had a renaissance with the Cardinals. We got to the Super Bowl, and then we lost to the Pittsburgh Steelers.
But just don't mention
It's the only time we've been to the Super Bowl because of him, and we lost. Anyway,
So, got the Super Bowl.
yes,
How do you measure success,
yes.
though?
NFC champion. And another one which I'm sure Grant knows is that there's a goalkeeper called Tim Thomas, who
Tim Thomas.
I know, not a strong name, but
I love it. It's a
Two
superhero
first
name.
names.
Yo, it's Tim Thomas.
Tim Thomas. It's no, I try. I always picture a guy when I see their name, and I'm like, Tim Thomas.
He's got a big beard, stocky.
Oh,
That's how I
no,
was
I did
Tall
not
and
picture
stocky.
Tim.
All right.
Tim to me is skinny,
All right.
scrawny. Yeah, Tim.
But so he played ice hockey for I think like the first 10 years of his career. He couldn't find a team. He was struggling. Played a couple of games here, but eventually he got his chance. Became one of the best goalies in the league. Was Boston, but they won the Stanley Cup. He was the most important player in the playoffs or something like that. Ridiculously good. But there was an overriding point to this that went beyond just saying that these people were good.
Underdogs.
Yes.
The towering structure.
Later in life.
Yes, so
Labels.
that there's always the chance that like when we've been labelled as
Something.
a failure or kind of like there's always the chance to come back from that. There's always the chance to it's not a case of that it has to happen right now.
Yeah.
It's not a case of that it has to happen in the steps that you imagine and that by a certain age you've achieved it, you've kind of done it, you're kind of on fire for God, you've kind of reached that kind of top point in your curve and it's like, yes, I'm going for it, I'm going to do this for as much as I can and then it's going to be great. It doesn't need to happen in the timing that we deem it or the timing we want it to happen. If anything, it's not going to happen like that. The main point I was going to say, yes, I'm so glad I got it back, is that if you're doing something and it's coming fairly easy and you're kind of rising up with no barriers, no doors closing in your face, something's probably wrong. I think if you're kind of just easing your way up and just kind of, if you're not facing any adversity, I think part of that is that kind of, sometimes it can be maybe that the devil is like, okay, it's fine you do this because that's keeping you from your right purpose. I think often when we're doing something which is rightly ordained by God, it's what he absolutely wants us to be doing, whether it's in a season or whether it's long-term purpose like that. The devil, he always wants to try and stop that. He always wants to get roadblocks in the way, always wants to make it a struggle trying to achieve that. Because often I feel like it is kind of, though you have a time of blessing, then you'll maybe you'll hit a roadblock, you'll hit a door, which you kind of need to work through because the devil's trying to stop that. I think maybe it's too broad to say that in all cases if you're doing great, better watch out. But like, I feel that sometimes if you're not facing that adversity, there can sometimes be problems. I think often it is through the struggles which makes when you finally, whatever you end up doing, whatever ministry you has, it makes it more full and it gives it a greater purpose, and it is a truer representation of what God is wanting for you when you've kind of when it's had to been refined through the fire, refined through problems, you end up with a better product, just like whether it's gold or whether it's the pressure to make diamonds. You kind of need that. So I guess that's the thing. So when you're trying something new, you're trying to tear off a label, try something else, try and burrow down more into your purpose in God and what God wants you to do, to not feel put off when you kind of have these points of struggle, when you have these times when it feels like nothing's happening, when it feels like I'm trying, I'm waiting, I'm pressing on doors, but it seems like I'm just chilling, I'm kind of angsty, I kind of want to be doing something, I want to be moving on, I've got my idea of timings, I want to try and build on that. That don't worry too much about that, as much as if you're doing all that you can do, that's all that God's asking you to do. You can't create anything by yourself. So that was another point. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I love what you're saying, because I think you don't run after hard times, but they're gonna come. And Jesus, I think it's in James. I think someone spoke on this recently, but the whole like endurance produces faith. I think it's in James 1 or something, and it is a real thing of like you hate when you're in that sense of like I can remember like with my visa with Congo, my last such struggle. Like it was just horrible. Like just cons, like everything. It felt like roadblock, and I knew I was meant to go. So I was like, why can this just be easy, God? Like why does it have to be so much like, you know, like struggle of it to get the visa? This was last year, and I realized it really tested me, like, why am I doing this? Like, and actually caused more of a fight in me of like, I care about these people. I remember actually when I got the visa, I remember being like, God, like, just so happy. And he's like, Rebecca, like, I make a way. When you go for my people, I make a way. But I was like, why was a way not easier? But then actually it produces something in me, and you hate it at the time. You hate it. You're like, why does this not go? Oh. But actually, and that's a small thing for a predator, what some people go through. But actually it does, like, sometimes it is, there's obviously sometimes it is going to be such a grace. And, you know, I do know there's seasons where it is going to be so yeah, just everything's easy, and it's not like to expect the bad, but realizing when you go through that, realizing Jesus is producing something in you, and you're going to overcome it. And but I think it's true that, and especially, obviously, I don't like to talk about the enemy, but he does want to make things difficult. But knowing that actually we're doing it from victory, we're on the. I love what a friend says, like, we're on the offense, we're not on defense, we're on offense. So even when a thing comes, it's like, okay, we're doing it from victory. And he's producing a fight in us. So I think it is real, even though we don't want it to be our focus.
I think it's better to. I maybe made it seem a bit weird. It's not like when things are going well, we should be like, oh no, which is it's not. Which is maybe I made it sound at the start, which is wrong. But like to kind of, it's kind of it's more sort of like. Don't be sad when there's like struggles and stuff. It's coming from that. It's like when there's the hardships that you need to push through, that's okay. Rather than things are going really well, this must be wrong. Which I guess I understood
your heart in it.
Sure.
It's fine,
But hopefully,
No, I think that's right, and I think I think you recognize it because there feels like there's a determination, or there's more of a fight in you to keep persevering. I mean, like the Congo visa thing. I mean, there was no way that you could have, that wasn't, you were going to sort of give up on that. But I think when you recognize when there is a kind of I'm not very willing to take this, and it's not coming from a place. I think God's really good that stuff that's not meant to happen, He shuts doors and things like that. And I think it's a very clear. Yes, I've got one of those blast doors in Star Wars, kind of like coming out that you're not going to do this thing. So I think.
If you're a Jedi, you've got a lightsaber.
Well, there's still sometimes they don't work. So it's
technical.
But
gotta recharge.
So, but I think he's very good at putting those in the way. But I think when it is, there are those other times when there is that extra. You've got that kind of determination where it's like, I'm not taking this. And I think the visa's a really good example. I mean, summits that when I go to, with that, there was a lot of people who, you can't do this, but even where the venue was, a lot of people, there was a lot of times when it kind of felt like there were blocks in the way to it happening. It took flipping long enough to do the first thing in years. But, I think kind of there's that kind of determination to actually, I want to keep going, keep fighting for it, because it felt like it was something that needed to happen, or that felt like something that was appointed for you. So I think it's that recognition between the two, and I think, when that time comes, when there is a bit of that fight there and you're having to persevere, I think you recognize it, it feels different compared to just a complete, blast door closing.
That's really good. I feel like as well, sorry, going back to labels. Well, I'm not actually sorry, but
good.
Sorry.
to be British. I feel like when it's God's timing, when it's God's label on us, when you're a child of God, it's like His timing is totally different from when it's a label of the world, I'll say. So whatever it is, like your job or your education or whatever it is, then we have the world's timing. But when God's place, when you're I'm just a child of God, and or when God's like, okay, this is what you're going to do, or this is what I want you to do next, or whatever it is he's speaking to you, it's like, okay, there's not actually, his timing is so, I mean, he's outside time and space, so his timing is so perfect, and he will align things for you, but he'll work with you, and he'll tell you, and all that stuff, but it's just so different from the world, so I think it just takes that pressure off. You don't have that label of like, okay, now I have to achieve this and this and this by like I know when I was like heading towards 30, like now I'm like, I don't know why I was so stressed out, but I was just like, oh my goodness, I'm gonna be 30, and like, what if I achieved? And it was like this like big like thing, and then I was measuring everything by the world standards, like I should have done this, I should have a house with 2 garages, and you know, whatever. I don't know what you should have, but
standards.
all the things like, and they're all like things that don't even matter to me, you know, like just material stuff. And then like I was like, I should probably speak to God about this. And it was like, oh, actually, it was labels, like, and I just like ripped them off, and it was like, well, what's God saying? And it was like, oh, he's like, there's all the time in the world. Like, there's all the time in the world. Like, he's out with time, and he can, like, accelerate time or whatever. So, I don't know, I just want to say that to you to encourage you that, you know, yeah, when we really have that label of, like, child of God, it's just so freeing and so, yeah, timing. Just the world's timings is just, yeah.
So by the time I'm 30, I need to have 2 garages.
I don't think
But it's a real thing of like. But I think I love what you say, because it's such a, you know, even people's questions. Oh, so what? Oh, you're gonna, you know, have you got this yet, or have you done that, or?
You're going to America for 2 months.
Wow.
What are you gonna do?
But I think it is, and I think when people see, when you just have that rest and that peace, and because you trust God, and that He can, as you say, He can bring something in a moment, and then you don't have to. And I think it is. I think I used to have that. I'm behind schedule. Yeah. Like I'm behind. Like, you know, I think someone did like a preaching that in Bethel about the whole the timeline, and how sometimes we feel like we're behind. Like, you know, and actually God's like, you can't get behind God's timeline for you. Like, you know, He is, so when you just like let it go and trust Him that you're not gonna miss it. Mm-hmm. Obviously you can rebel and like do your own thing, but if you've got that heart of like, God, I want your best, and you're not gonna miss it. And I think sometimes we do determine it on other people's timeline, or what the world is saying, or like, by this time I'm meant to be married with kids, or this time I'm meant to be achieved this amount. Actually, that might be for one person's story, but if we use that as our timeline, we do feel behind time. But actually, when we see, okay, actually, no, God's got a timeline for me. He's outside that. He can bring something in a moment. So I think it's really liberating what you're saying, because I think all of us could probably do that, and maybe not all double carriaging. I think that's quite a cool little thing that you had there.
I don't actually feel that,
you're gonna get a double garage now. I just believe it. I'm like, you're gonna get this massive.
I can cars then.
You're gonna have like
a motorbike. I've been making my houses on The Sims all wrong. I need to more car space.
What about a basement, guys? A soundproof basement, and then you could do your like.
Are we all
living
murdering people? No one will hear this sound.
I was meaning for like music stuff. Like you could do it's like soundproof. You could be as loud as you.
I'm just imagining Grant as a 47-year-old with a receding hairline, who's like the drummer for like a teen like punk band. Rebecca, you're just coming down the stairs to the basement like, Grand, dinner's ready, and you're like, okay, we'll just be 30 more minutes. Can you bring some more cookies and milk?
Well, look like a vest.
And they're like,
and then like the rhythm guitarist is like, thanks. Can you bring us a Fanta as well?
Oh gosh. Maybe not in the basement. The basement is gone.
Alright, now we're gonna do Praises Rising.
Every time.
Okay. We are coming up to an hour.
No way.
This has been good.
We've
gone over
more.
time.
You said it was going to be short.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, you said it was going to be short.
It's because you put a label on it, and then...
I know.
Just like that.